Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. That's the main man there, Greg Cosell, of course. And I'm happy to have you guys in. We're happy to have you guys in for this week 11 edition. Greg, a lot of fun games on the board this week, and in particular, I'm sure the matchup show always fun with you and Sal Pal and Darius Butler on ESPN, but there's some really fun tactical matchups for you
Yeah,
to analyze this week.
and we're doing it a little differently this week because there's two really big games. So we're making those two games what we call full segment games. So that's Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens, Steelers. So we're doing those as full segment games as opposed to just, one piece and move on to another game. So, gives us a chance to breathe a little more with those two matchups. And, they're certainly worthy of it.
Yeah, no, deservedly so. Absolutely. Since we are taping this on a Thursday and there will be an Eagles Commanders game tonight, we're obviously going to get into a little bit of Will Levis stuff. They have the Vikings this week, and that's an interesting matchup, certainly on both sides of the ball to kind of break down. But I'm curious to know what you think of the way that the Eagles have kind of turned around their season a little bit and seem to have found a groove. Obviously, having Devontae Smith and whenever AJ Brown gets fully back into the lineup, that will help them as well. But what do you make of the Eagles right now?
Yeah, I think they've settled into a pretty comfortable identity as to who they are. Um, they're a running football team is their foundation. Saquon Barkley per game has the most first down rushes of any back in the league, which includes Derrick Henry, by the way. So they run the ball, and Jalen Hurts does not drop back. They don't ask him to drop back as much as many other quarterbacks in the league, but he certainly can make throws outside the numbers. His legs are a big factor in what they do, both by design and scrambling ability. And their defense has played much, much better. Now, they've also been fortunate to some degree in the way this season has played out. But, as we always say, you can only play the teams that are on your schedule. They were, when they played Jacksonville, everybody thought Jacksonville would be a good team this year. In fact, that was initially a Sunday night game that got moved. Then they played Dallas, of course, without Dak Prescott. So, these things help, but the point is that you got to win the games. So, defensively, they've improved dramatically since Cooper DeJean became their slot corner, which was week 5. Zach Bond at stack backer, a position he never played before, even in college, has really been a revelation. He's probably been one of the top 5 or 6 stack backers in the league this year. The rookie corner, Quinyon Mitchell's been very good. So, they've really settled into, I think, what their identity is, and I think they feel really comfortable playing that way.
Yeah, it's a tough test this week with the Commanders. They did just lose their third game of the season against the Steelers, but by 1 point. It was a very, very
Yeah.
tightly contested game between them and the Steelers. Jaden Daniels continues to be very effective, Greg, but in that game against the Steelers, they really took away his ability to kind of make plays with his legs. I think he only had 3 carries for 5 yards
Yeah.
in this
It,
game. Still able to move the ball a little bit through the air, but I mean, Jaden Daniels and against this Eagles defense is going to be a great watch.
yeah, and I think the Steelers, and again, I'm not a blueprint believer because every game is different, okay? And you might take pieces from what a team does well against your opponent and say, okay, we'll try to incorporate some of that. But nothing is an exact science. It's not a mathematical equation. To me, too many people get caught up in blueprints. But the point I was going to make was this, is I thought the Steelers did a really good job with disguise and late coverage rotation. And you want to do that with pretty much any quarterback, but certainly with young quarterbacks who've not seen everything at the NFL level, because what you want to make them do is think through what they're seeing as they're dropping back. Because it happens, Buck, as you know, you've been covering, football for a while. It happens fast. And if you have to start thinking through what you're seeing as you're dropping back, you start to feel like I've got to play faster because, it's not registering the way I want it to. And I think they did a nice job with that. Plus, the Commanders' O-line is not a great pass protecting O-line, given who they're putting out there now due to some injuries as well. And of course, we know what the Steelers' pass rush is. So that's where I think the Eagles have to take advantage. They have to win that unit matchup, their D line versus the Commanders' O line.
Will be a fun one on Thursday Night Football. That discussion though about quarterbacks and what they're able to diagnose pre-snap versus what the defense shows them post-snap is a good transition into our Will Levis
Sure
conversation.
is. Sure. Particularly who they're playing. Particularly
Yeah,
who they're playing.
Oh God, I mean, even Brian Callahan, when talking about the Vikings defense, just kind of scoffed and acknowledged how tough a challenge this is this weekend. Understandably so. But Will Levis did return to the lineup this past weekend, Greg, against the Chargers, and nothing necessarily sexy about the performance, but it was not, if we're looking for incremental steps here from this guy.
Right.
No turnovers in this game. He was fairly efficient against a quality defense in the Los Angeles Chargers. Still not good enough to win the game, but I wonder what you saw from a 1,000-foot view with Will Levis back in.
Yeah. And look, every week's different. And we'll get to the Vikings momentarily. And this week, everything could be bad just because of the nature of the opponent. But in the overall scheme of things, don't forget the Chargers had allowed the fewest points per game they still have in the NFL. So as you said, it's a good defense. But I thought just incrementally, really good word you used there as well. It was a step in the right direction. Now, I don't want people to think all of a sudden he's going to be great because, like I said, the opponent this week is really difficult to play against in the Vikings. But I thought that it was definitely a step in the right direction. There's some areas that Levis clearly needs to continue to improve, and some you might think that he can, and some maybe he can't. Because one area that he needs to get better at is his timing. He's much more of a see it, throw it quarterback than he is a true timing anticipation passer. And sometimes you can get away with that if you have a big arm, which he clearly has. So that's something to watch going forward because even on some completions, like he hit Ridley for 15 yards on the first play of the third quarter. You probably remember the play. I know you look at this really closely, but he took a little bit of an extra hitch, and he's just a hair late. But that hair late in the NFL matters. And it allowed because Ridley ran a curl route and he caught it, and I forget who made the tackle on him was the corner, the right corner. But if that ball's out just a hair sooner, I'm not saying Ridley turns and runs for a touchdown, but there's a little more room there. So instead, what happens is he catches and he gets hit the second the ball hits him. And that throw was clearly it was actually a really good call to start a third quarter drive. It was just a basic boundary concept, and he hit him, boom, and it was a good start to the quarter. But he's a little bit of a see it, throw it guy as opposed to an anticipation guy.
Yeah, and Brian Callahan talked to us about that this week. We spoke with Levis yesterday as we taped this on a Thursday as well, and kind of seeing if he's also feeling more comfortable because a part of this, Greg, as we talked about with quarterbacks getting sped up and him in particular getting playing too fast.
Yes.
Right. There was that he's always had a little bit of that. And I was curious to see whether or not he might settle down in his first game back in 3 weeks. And I wonder what you made of him generally with that kind of stuff when we talk about it, because he didn't necessarily seem like he got too sped up in this game, even though he's still displaying some of the things that we talk about on a regular basis, because that's not new stuff, him being a beat
No.
late on some of these
No,
throws.
and I think the only way that that can change is through reps. Um, and that's why we talked while Mason Rudolph was playing, and I said as soon as Levis is healthy, he has to play every single snap because he just has to keep playing so that he becomes more comfortable, two, with what he's seeing, one, with what he's seeing, two, with the speed of the game. He just has to get comfortable playing, dropping back, seeing it, and throwing it. Okay. Because so much of the pass games are timing and anticipation. And in this league, you cannot wait until a guy is open to make certain throws. Some throws, yes, but certain throws, no. Like the play I mentioned, that curl route, you can't wait till the receiver turns back to you to throw it. If the passing window is clean, that ball has to be out before he turns back to you. So, little things like that. But ideally, it doesn't always happen. Ideally, it comes with reps, and that's why he's got to play. Again, we don't know what the organizational decision is, if they view him as the guy or if they've already moved on in their mind. We don't know that, and they're not going to tell us, nor should they. But bottom line is, Mason Rudolph's not your quarterback next year. So you have to play Will Levis. But yes, I agree with you. I think overall, he didn't look as fast in this game.
Again, incremental progress. We're talking baby
Right.
steps. Unfortunate that it's 10 weeks in, but you understand. And to your point about reps, Greg, like he's got to protect himself so that he can be available,
Correct.
get these continued reps, continue to grow within the scope of the offense for as much. I mean, he's
But
got 8 opportunities left to go here in
but
May.
here's the sort of unspoken point, which quarterback coaches, they may not talk about it to you, but it's part of the position and how it's coached. When you're a see it, throw it guy, and therefore you're a hair late, what happens is there are throws that are available by NFL standards that you don't see as viable throws because they're anticipation throws, and that's not the way you're seeing it. So you end up holding the ball because you don't see that throw as, yeah, that's a throw. And when you're dealing with a quarterback that does that, plus an O line that's still a work in progress, that doesn't mix real well. So that's why he still gets sacked more than he should. It's not
Uh,
all the O line. Some of it is, but it's not all the O line.
yeah,
And
and
I can
and
just
he's
be
time.
honest. I can just be honest based on tape. They need an upgraded right guard.
Yes, and that is something that they are going to have. The right side of the offensive line, just generally right
Needs to be
now.
addressed. Needs to be addressed in the offseason.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter who they've got playing quarterback for them in 2025 if they cannot be at
No.
least adequately protected. And that's been
Right.
a part of the struggle here
Right.
as well. Now, that struggle is not going to get any easier this week because
No.
Minnesota coming to town. They're first in EPA per play. They're excellent against the run. They are excellent at creating interception opportunities. And certainly they deploy a lot of different disguised looks to try and
Ah,
put these quarterbacks in a blender. Brian Flores is excellent at what he does, Greg. I went back and watched a couple of Minnesota games here in the last couple of weeks, and you know we'll get to the offense here in just a second, but there's no question that this defense is executing as at high as at as high as a level as any defense in football right now.
well, and that's the reason. The reason Bill Callahan gave a sigh or whatever sound he made when he was asked about it
Yeah,
is
there's more of
because
a
what
groan.
right is because what they do maybe better than any team is the league is show you pressure fronts. 6 and 7, and you watched a couple of games, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. 6 and 7 defenders right on the ball. Okay. Now, because of that, you have to protect that. You can't make guesses as to, well, I think he'll come now, he won't come. You've got to protect. When there's 7 on the ball, you've got to protect. So they dictate how you protect. That's what really good defensive coordinators do is they understand your protection schemes and they dictate how you have to protect based on what they show you. And then they can break it down. So when they line up with 6 or 7, you have to protect. And then what they often do is then they drop people out and they might rush with 3 or 4, but they've made you keep people in. So they end up playing with 7 or 8 in coverage, and you're sending out 3 receivers as primary receivers. Then you might send out your back and your tight end can maybe leak out late, but they're not primary receivers. So they end up with 8 in coverage in zone because they don't play man, by the way. 8 in zone versus 3 receivers. Those numbers don't work for a passing game really well. And quarterbacks tend to hold the ball. And Will Levis has a tendency to do that anyway. And they do also have some great pressure concepts where they do bring 5 and 6. So this is a challenge. This is a homework game all through this week. You really have to study. You have to be aware what they're doing. You're going to get beat in this game. Book it. You're going to get beat. You can't let that ruin your day. But because there's so many moving parts on their defense, every once in a while they I don't want to call it a bust per se, but somebody maybe doesn't get quite to the right spot and there's voids in their zone coverage. When that happens, you have to be able to hit a play. And again, we know the Titans are not putting up 40. That's not my point, but you have to be able to hit a play.
Yeah, no, you have to be able to take the opportunities that the defense gives you because they're going to
Right,
be few and far
right, right.
in between. To
But
your
they're
point.
tough to play. I mean, I can't stress enough and I know this might not be the wonderful news that Titan fans want to hear, but this is a really difficult defense to play against.
Yeah, Titans fans are just holding on to their butts at this point. They're just trying to survive the rest of this regular
Right,
season.
right, right.
So, and to your point, like the homework element of it, right? Even the most experienced quarterbacks get got by this defense.
And
Aaron
O lines, O
Rodgers,
lines too, even experienced O lines. I mean, that's the factor too.
Right, because you have to have your protections adequate. You have to make sure that you're protecting all those fronts that they present, as you're saying, without, leaving yourself exposed. And like Aaron Rodgers on that Andrew Van Ginkel interception that he threw in that London game a couple of weeks ago, it made me think of Will Levis throwing the ball to Emmanuel Ogbah. I know it's not the exact same defense or exact same
But it's the
concept,
same principle.
same principle, right?
Yeah,
And
and,
that,
and keep in mind too that when they played Minnesota, even Harrison Smith he was a free hitter sacking Rodgers, and Rodgers has seen everything, so one would have to assume that he didn't make the mistake. Again, we don't know, we're not in their meetings,
yeah.
but you'd have to assume that Rodgers didn't make the mistake. So this is what they do. There'll be some free hitters in this game. I'm telling you, it'll happen. There'll be some free hitters at Levis in this game. The question is, how does that play out on those plays?
A huge test for a quarterback who's still looking to find his footing. Not exactly what you want to see if you're Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans offensive coaching staff at this point in time. To the other side of the ball for Minnesota, the Vikings offense, Sam Darnold. Where are we with Sam Darnold right now? Because they had him playing at a very high level. Obviously, the Jags game is not a performance where he's covered himself in glory. But are you seeing teams adjust to what the Vikings are doing on offense that's seeing that Darnold efficiency dip a little bit, or is that more specific to the player from your
Well,
perspective?
it's funny. I watched that tape, and I watched Arnold every week because full confession, I know Kevin O'Connell pretty well. I don't talk to him during the season. I try not to, talk to too many coaches during the season because they're busy. I'm busy, but I know Kevin, and we talked in the off season quite a bit. I didn't think any of the three interceptions, quite frankly, were on Darnold. I mean, I know people are probably saying who probably just saw the numbers, oh, 3 picks, Darnold's now back to being Darnold, but I didn't think they were on him. And I didn't think when I finished watching the tape that he played poorly. And that's a difficult offense to defend. They do a really, really good job with their route concepts. They work the middle of the field between the numbers exceptionally well. Jefferson is a beast. Obviously, it's going to be Baker and Brownlee plays the boundary corner, and Baker plays the field corner. They're not going to change that because they're two young players. They're not messing around with that. So they're going to have some issues with Jefferson. I mean, he's a really tough guy to play against. And Hawkinson being back now, a healthy Hawkinson is a top 5 tight end in this league. I mean, you can see the athleticism. You saw it last week in his second game when he's starting to become more involved in their offense. They run the ball efficiently. I don't know about Aaron Jones. I know he's got a rib injury. We're talking on a Thursday. I don't know what his status is. If it's not him, it would be Akers and Chandler. But they're going to run the ball. They're not one of those let's just throw it around the yard teams by any stretch of the imagination. Well, the one area that really stood out last week as potentially problematic, and this is where, it becomes a unit versus unit. Their O-line struggled last week.
Hmm.
And, the Titans D line any given Sunday can be very good. So that's an area, they need to stop the run. I don't want to be cliched, but this is just the reality. They need to stop the run and hope they can speed up Darnold when you get into those passing situations.
Yeah, to your point, and also speaking of injuries, Sam Darnold was on the injury report yesterday, limited with a right hand injury. So we'll see.
I
Uh,
would assume he's going to play, though.
I would also assume
Yeah.
as well. I personally hope Aaron Jones plays. He's just such a fun player, Greg.
Yeah.
As I said, going back and watching a couple of Vikings games here in the last week, like he's just got such great ability and also the contact balance that he
Yeah.
has. Once he takes contact and just finds ways to get those hard yards after the fact, like he's just one of the most entertaining backs I think in
And, yeah,
football
and
right
it's so funny how backs work in the draft because I did him coming out of UTEP. He was not a Power Five guy, and I really loved him. I mean, again, when I say love him, I didn't think he was going to be a top 10 pick, but you know how backs are. And I'm not surprised at his NFL career because I thought he was a really, really good back, but he was a fifth round pick, small school guy. Backs don't get drafted high unless people think they're special, whatever that term means. So he's just been a really, really good pro.
Absolutely. And then, as you mentioned, Justin Jefferson, is there anything that man does not do at an all pro level, Greg? He's
I mean,
excellent.
his ability, and I was wrong on him. When I say wrong, I truly thought based on his college career that he'd be a slot receiver. I didn't make the leap in my mind, so I was wrong. I thought he'd be a good, a good slot receiver, but he's obviously, to me, he's the best receiver in football. But his ability to um, make cuts without having to slow down or shorten his stride because he's got a big time stride to me is remarkable. I mean, he doesn't have to slow down or shorten that stride when he breaks. And that is so hard for a defensive back because they're looking for tells as to when a guy breaks. And a lot of guys give you tells because their body position changes, their stride shortens slightly. There's something they give away. He doesn't give that away.
Truly, just an excellent player to be able to watch. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in person this weekend at Neyland
Well, how's the weather
Stadium.
supposed to be?
Well, they're supposed to be all right. It's been a little rainy here the last couple of days, but things supposed to clear up and it's supposed to actually feel like fall for the first time. I think we're going to be under 7 degrees for the first time
Oh, okay.
basically this year.
Right, right.
So we'll see what that looks like on Sunday in the noon slate. The rest of the NFL weekend is a great one. Of course, the NFL matchup show gets you ready each and every week with Greg, Sal Pal, and Darius Butler. Greg, I know as you mentioned, you're doing full segment features on that Chiefs Bills game and
And
Ravens
Ravens
Steelers.
Steelers.
Where do you want to start as far as the tactical matchups that you guys are going to be breaking down? Because there's fun ones all over the place in those two games.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Chiefs Bills is really interesting because they have a history. They seemingly play every year, sometimes twice. Um, and the approach the Bills took last year in the divisional playoff game, which, as many might remember, Tyler Bass missed a field goal that would have tied it late in the game. Um, the Bills were very conservative. They almost played to minimize risk as opposed to being aggressive. And there's no right or wrong way. I'm not saying they made a mistake because one thing about Steve Spagnuolo, and you don't want to get caught up in this, is he's an unbelievable blitzer. He uses defensive backs as well or better than any D coordinator in the league as blitzers, and it's really, really difficult because he doesn't show his hand really well. There's really good disguise. He does such a great job with that, and you don't want to get caught up in negative plays. And that's so I think the Bills, and again, we don't know what they'll do this year, but last year in that divisional playoff game, their longest play was 18 yards. They did not really push it down the field at all. And I don't think they turned it over. I can't remember, but they just played, very methodically. They were not looking to try to make big plays as much to, hey, let's sustain, let's hold the ball. And you could say it kind of worked. They scored 24. I think it was 27-24. But then the other game, Ravens Steelers, the Ravens offense has been so good now. The Steelers defense is really good, and Lamar has not had great games against them. But they've scored far and away the most offensive touchdowns in the league. They're phenomenal in the red zone. They get to the red zone more than any team in the league by a wide margin, and they score touchdowns when they get to the red zone for two reasons. Number one, really well schemed plays and the Lamar factor.
Yeah.
So, but this is a really good defense they're playing against, and they traded for Preston Smith, who played 20 plus snaps this past week, and he's a good player.
Yeah, and the Ravens having defensive issues right now, specifically
Yeah,
for
Kyle
secondary.
Hamilton is out.
Yeah, dealing with
Yeah,
injury and
yeah,
and just allowing too many explosive plays so far this season. It should be
yeah.
an excellent slate of football, and it'll get started tonight. I'll look forward to the NFL matchup show this weekend. Greg, good as always to see you. Thanks for making some time, buddy.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.